While it is titled How to Film a Robot Reveal Video, this presentation is over how to film your robot in general and how to ultimately come off as a good PR person who represents his robot and his team well. So this can be translated into how to film robots, how to film your team, how to film everything. It's pretty general knowledge. So let's define FTC, and let's define where you are and where you stand within your community. So as an FTC member, you're a part of a team. And FTC is an organization, but we're going to pretend like that doesn't exist, and all of you are independent teams with no one over you that go and build your robots each year. So for an FTC team, you all have members, you all have a budget, you all have sponsors, you put out a competition robot or a product each year, and you have to maintain an image. So what this can contrast to is a company. A company has members or employees, both have a budget. Sponsors are contracts with other corporations. Both of them, and for sake of clarification, this is more of a, this isn't a, it's not a company that is by itself and it's not downplayed. We're talking about larger companies like Apple or Intel. They have large products that they advertise all year round. So they put out a product every year. Most companies, maybe bi-yearly, whatever, but they still put out a product frequently and they have to advertise it, and both maintain an image, except for corporations. In FTC, we have the pleasure of, if the public doesn't know who we are, we still get to exist. For companies like Apple and Intel, if the public doesn't know who you are, you don't exist because they are your source of income. For us, it can be our source of revenue. It can be our source of sponsorships. So I'm going to take my team, or any FTC team, take your own team, compare it. I'm going to say it's equal to a company. So just like most FTC teams, we all have different divisions inside of our robotics team. We have R&D, which is just building new designs and seeing if they work. We have media, all of that just like a regular company would. That's interesting. So you, when you go to competitions and you talk to people, you are the corporate representative. When you talk to anybody, you are representing your team, and how you act directly reflects what's going on with your team, and that's great. And you are your company's image. But the one thing you can't account for is the product image, which is your robot. Your robot speaks for itself. You can meet as many representatives from any company, and they can talk to you as much as they want. Like a car salesman. He can try and talk you into a car, but if the car's bad, it doesn't matter. The product image is what a lot of people care about over your team. And for sponsors, it's about half and half. So what do you do when you can't speak? Or what do you do when you have to show? So over the internet, YouTube, whatever, or without you saying anything, you use media. And media is a growing form, obviously, of how companies advertise themselves. And so usually when we think of media, we think of these. We think of Facebook, we think of Twitter, Instagram, whatever. But for the sake of keeping this in half an hour, we're going to focus on video. YouTube is your primary upload source. So video was invented in the 1890s. The first production company was officially founded in 1897. And the first full-length production came out in 1906 from an Australian-based company. A little bit of history. But advertising through video is tricky because it's easy to talk. And, it's easy to talk if you're trained, but showing is different because you have to know what the person you're talking to wants to see, and you want to appeal to them as much as you can. So 5 good points on making a video for anything. This is going to be narrowed down to FTC, and this is going to be narrowed down to your team specifically. 1, identify your camera. Is it a phone? Is it a production camera? Is it a handheld video camera? Anything. Just if it shoots video, make sure you know what it is. And then 2, identify your subject. So what you'll be filming for us, that's the robot. 3, determine video classification, what type of video it is. We'll get into that later. Identify your target audience. Who is this advertised to? And 5, how you will edit that video. So we'll go into each of these points in depth, starting with number 1. It's not about what camera you're using, it's the weaknesses of the camera. Just like a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, you can have the highest end quality camera you want, but if it doesn't shoot well in a certain setting, you just can't use it, or you have to compensate. But I am assuming on a level to where no one here is exactly a Premiere Pro expert and works for a good film company, so this is for general. If the video you're filming and you don't want to edit it, you don't want to do color correction or anything, you have to be comfortable with what you're shooting is what you get, and that's what you see on the screen. And if that is the case, you need to make sure that you know what your camera can and cannot film, and make sure that you film around it. Can it capture detail well, shallow focus, etc.? And so make it look like your video was made without limitations. And there's an asterisk because that can't always happen. Like, for example, last year's robot reveal, my camera didn't do very well in low lighting. However, the whole thing's on a stage in a very closed room. So I had to film it with stage lights and as much lighting as I can without ruining the effect. The result of that is grain, but it's fine, so long as you can minimize damage. So make sure to identify your subject, what you're filming. For us, this is the robot. This is the main product your company's putting out every year. So to make sure you film your subject well, you should probably break it down a little bit. So for us, a subject is a cool robot, but a cool robot is complicated. And complicated for the general population is very confusing unless it's explained to them. And confusing loses interest in your video. So let's define a robot. It's complex, an inanimate object, however it's piloted, high functionality, and it's expensive. That last point will be advertised mostly only to sponsors. So take each element and make sure you touch on it individually. Make sure that in your video you go through, or on your presentation, whoever you're showing your video to, make sure you thoroughly go through the points of what you're filming so they can follow you. So, okay, again, robot, complex, high functionality, etc. So 3, determine the video classification. So what type of video are you making? Is it a creative video? Is it an artistic video? Is it functional? Is it industrial? Or is it informative? For the sake of keeping this just for FTC, usually when we make videos, it's functional and industrial. It's mostly a mix between the two. Functional is usually cut and dry. This is what we're filming, this is what we have, and it works. Industrial usually includes more details, and it's usually more informative. A good mix between the two works for most audiences, especially for FTC. And one of the biggest points is don't change the subconscious topic. So it's very confusing and it's very distracting if you make an industrial video and halfway through you decide to get artistic with it, or halfway through you decide to make it creative. You need to stick with the same topic the whole time, or your audience may get a little confused. So distracting, confusing, and one of the biggest things about our robots is they're significant. They're something to look at. The robots are made by all of the engineers in this room, and we make it work together. And it's definitely not something that anyone could do. And so you want to make sure that the video captures the fact that the robot is significant. And by changing topics, by taking away from an industrial video, or if it's purely artistic and halfway through it gets industrial or informative only, it can take away significance from what you're trying to advertise. So 4, identify your target audience. Pretty much, who are you filming this for? And the 3 main topics the 3 main subjects for FTC robot videos is other FTC team members, the general public, or investors and sponsors. Maybe it's these two combined, maybe it's other FTC members and sponsors. Whatever your combination is, your target audience determines the type of video. For example, if you're showing a robot to the general public, you may not want to make it too artistic because they just wouldn't understand what's going on and what the robot is doing in the video and why that matters. The general public needs to be informed because they don't know what's going on. Same with a lot of sponsors. Even if sponsors have heard about what FTC is, they probably haven't heard about the yearly competition. So your target audience, general population, video type, industrial is best. So for anyone who is outside of the FTC community, doesn't know what the robot is, like a family member, for example, you want to show your robot to your grandma, whoever, you can't exactly just show them a video of the robot moving because they have all these questions. What is the field? What is it driving on? What am I looking at? What is it doing? Why is it doing what it's doing? Industrial is meant, so it's not artistic, it's not creative, it doesn't take that much effort filming-wise, but it's made so you can sit down with your audience and show the people what the robot's doing, how it's doing it, and why that has any importance at all. So details, it explains what's going on, FTC members, functional. FTC members, yeah, you don't have to explain anything. You can just show the robot driving on a field and everyone knows what's going on. That's probably the least amount of effort, and that is what's easiest to upload, but that's a very niche community. That's only if you're showing it to people in other competitions or if it's advertised specifically to other members. And then the general population is probably a combination between functional and industrial. And again, don't change the subconscious topic. If you are making a video for the general public and then halfway through it's for FTC members only, it would completely lose people. And if you want to have a well-defined video, you don't want to have that happen. So, 4 points. Last point, how are you going to edit the video? And I'm not going into anything too complicated, but one of the biggest points that filmmakers will always talk about is every video is a story. Every video gives people information in a way that will make them do something. One of the biggest parts of marketing is figuring out what do you want your people to feel about your brand, and what do you want them to do about it. And the same applies for video in a very large sense, is when they see your video, what do you want them to do about it? How do you want them to feel about your team? So stories with too much details can distract and confuse. I'm sure we've all read at least one book to where they spend 2 pages describing one thing and it's very dry and very boring. Videos can definitely go the same way. So make sure that when you are making the video, if you're going industrial, don't make the whole thing narrative and just confusing with dry details. You want to make sure you demonstrate, and you want to make sure that you properly have a wide spectrum of what's happening. So present your information in a way so it's easy to follow, easy to understand, easy to talk about. For example, if you want to show a video of your robot driving up the mountain and doing a pull-up, instead of showing how the pull-up mechanism works and then you show it driving and going up the mountain, maybe show off the drivetrain first, and then maybe show how it climbs up the mountain, and then maybe review the mechanism for how it places the hook and does the pull-up. Things like that. You want the person to be engaged and you want them to follow what you're presenting to them. Your 5 points: identify your camera, identify your subject, determine video classification, identify your target audience, and how will you edit the video. Don't give them too much information at once. Don't throw everything in their face, even though that's mostly how modern media is done. You just get things thrown in your face, and then before you know it, everything's over. That works for movies, and that works for cool action sequences and drama, but not when people are confused and they don't know what they're watching. You want to spoon-feed them information. So remember, you are the company's image, and the product image is the video you're making. With a combination, you can look impressive and you can look professional. And most importantly, make sure both are presentable.